We have an incredible panel with us tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce them. First of all, Satya Dunning, the freelance project officer at Interfaith Glasgow. Her remit includes supporting interfaith engagement and empowering faith communities to participate in dialogue and action around the climate crisis and COP26. So thank you for joining us. We've also got Stephen Curran, manager of Eco Congregation Scotland. He works to build the growing numbers of eco congregations, developing work in partnership with environmental and church groups, and increasingly working with other faith communities, particularly in this year of COP26. Stephen lives on Glasgow South Side and has been a Glasgow City Councillor for the past 18 years, so thank you for joining us. And lastly, we've got Rabbis Wittenberg and Mason, two of the 4 leading rabbis who lead Eco Synagogue. Rabbi Mason is a rabbi at Muswell Hill Synagogue, an executive member of the Rabbinical Council of the United Synagogue, and Rabbi Wittenberg is the senior rabbi of Masorti Judaism UK and is rabbi at New North London Synagogue. So thank you all for joining, and we're very grateful to have you. We'd like to kick off first of all with Satya, who's going to share some of the critical importances of COP26 and how our climate work relates to their international initiatives. So thank you for joining us, Satya, and I'll pass to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you, Ruby and SCoJeC, for inviting me to speak. I am now going to have a look at my written notes. So you're going to disappear from my screen, but I will try and reappear to see you to make sure that you're still there. So just give me a moment. So that's it. Okay. So first of all, about Interfaith Glasgow. Interfaith Glasgow is an award-winning charity promoting positive engagement between people of different religions and beliefs in Glasgow. We are a small staff team directed by our board of trustees and supported by a fantastic group of volunteers. Our focus is on grassroots community development. We promote and facilitate constructive engagement between people of diverse faiths and beliefs, religious and non-religious, so as to help create a better, connected, safer, and more harmonious city for all. So we do this through increasing friendships and societal interaction between people of diverse faiths and beliefs to help overcome fear and suspicion, fostering greater mutual understanding and trust, and challenging prejudices and misconceptions. And finally, increasing opportunities for people from different faith communities to work cooperatively to address issues of common concern. And there is no greater issue of common concern that requires us to work cooperatively than the climate crisis. 2020 was a year like no other. Coronavirus highlighted even more deep inequalities in our society and communities in terms of access to resources such as food and health services. It brought even more to light the injustice and climate chaos suffered by countries in the Southern Hemisphere, and our unequal relationship with the earth and the ensuing disastrous impact on her. Yes, this crisis certainly has amplified awareness of both our vulnerability as a species and also of our beautiful planet and living creatures. So let me just stop and just come back to Zoom just to see you all. You're still there. Just going to go back to my written notes again. So the coronavirus pandemic, the crisis, has showed us that our normal has us on a course to environmental catastrophe. Listening to activists from diverse backgrounds, what we have heard at Interfaith Glasgow events and dialogues is that the fundamental root cause of this crisis is our profound disconnection and imbalance between people and the earth. A disconnection that has allowed humanity to treat this planet as yet another commodity. We need to interrogate this destructive worldview and mindset and repair that relationship. At a time when so many social and environmental challenges compete for our attention, the result is often hopelessness and in action. Given the postponement of the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, for a whole year, we must make sure that we use this time well. COP26 is being referred to as our last chance to tackle the climate crisis, and this is the message we will be sharing with local faith communities over the remaining months until November and beyond. We want faith communities to know that they can make a difference, irrespective of age, experience, or even detailed knowledge about climate change, about COP26. They have in commonality the compassion, the inner movement and motivation to nurture and sustain all of life and nature. They have the words to cut through the noise and motivate people to act. They have an important role to play in the great civil society movement that has come together and is building momentum in Scotland, the UK, and beyond. Faith traditions have deep wells of wisdom to articulate the sacred vision about our planet and practical tools to help us. So there will be many, many events, including various pilgrimages happening in the run-up to and during COP, both online and in person. And for more information about that, you can check the Climate Fringe website, which I will put in later on in the chat. The focal point of our plans at Interfaith Glasgow is an interfaith action, which will be a prayer and meditation vigil on Sunday, the 31st of October. It will take place in Glasgow's main square the day before COP begins. Working with Interfaith Scotland, this event will mark the launch of Scottish Interfaith Week, which this year has been moved to coincide with COP26, and we will be on the theme of Together for Our Planet. Our intention is to bring together religious leaders and faith community members, both locals and those who will travel to Glasgow for the COP, people from across the world's faith traditions, and including Indigenous leaders who plan to make the long journey here, to come together in Glasgow's main square to pray or meditate alongside each other in a manner of their tradition. We are limited in numbers, but of course we welcome everyone to join us online or remotely. We want to send a message of hope and solidarity in a very public way to those involved in the negotiations and on whose shoulders so much responsibility rests. So I think I'm coming up to my time. My time is nearly up, isn't it? Kirsty, I'll just say a few more words and I will be done. So we accept that there will be limits in place as to how many people we can bring together physically, but we want to make it possible for people to participate no matter where they are in the world. And so we will live stream the vigil and work with partners around the world to broadcast it and encourage people to share their prayers for COP via social media. We want to create a sense that the world is present in Glasgow during this pivotal time and hope to harness the capabilities of technology to make that a reality. So while we have the advantage of being in Glasgow, where there is lots of enthusiasm and support on the ground, and we are building global connection, we don't have a big PR budget, and we are at the early stages of planning. So if there's anyone listening who has experience in this kind of thing, or if you think your organization could help share the vigil and call to prayer and meditation, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you for listening. Thank you, SCoJeC, again for the invitation. Back to you, Kirsty.
Thank you so much, Satya. I'd like to move on to our representatives from eco-congregations and eco-synagogue to share their thoughts on how we can actively make a difference even during the pandemic. So perhaps head over to Stephen first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. I'm delighted to be here. It's wonderful to be able to share, even when we've had the pandemic, and that's a little bit what we'll be talking about, and how we could actively continue to make a difference, even with the difficulties that we've had. I'm just going to quickly share a presentation we've got here as well for you. So we're delighted to be told about the start of the Jewish Climate Network forming earlier during the pandemic, basically as a result of the consideration across all the different traditions in the Jewish community in Scotland to make a real difference on this issue. One thing we were really fascinated about was I'd already spoken at the Council of Christians and Jews in Scotland and doing a climate conversation. Philip Mendelsohn will remember this, and subsequently Interfaith Glasgow, where I did a similar event, and Philip said to me I was more energised at the second event. So you can tell, even in the space of a couple of years, we've moved from climate crisis to climate emergency, and it used to just be climate change we spoke about. Congregation Scotland's an ecumenical charity working with churches all across Scotland of all different traditions, very similar to the Scottish Jewish Climate Network in terms of your relationship with others as well. What we have from our own perspective is 512 churches registered all across Scotland, all different sizes, shapes, different denominations and backgrounds, with the largest movement of local environmental groups in Scotland. And it's basically local groups, faith-based movement, caring passionately about creation with a belief in a creator who's entrusted care through the stories we share as people of faith through Genesis and the promise to Noah. And we work cooperatively with each other and with others who care about the environment, encouraging transformational change at individual, community and national levels. And one important thing about our charity is increasingly this year, in the year of COP, one of our objectives is to show that the promotion of religious, racial and social harmony through a demonstration that care for creation is an essential part of all faiths, and by working with other faiths and groups to promote this understanding. And that means the important work Interfaith Glasgow and Interfaith Scotland are doing, and also the Make COP Count group across the UK with different faith groups. We're working collectively to focus on that. But when we used to meet together as a group in our local congregations from whatever religious tradition, it used to look like this, and now it's looked very much like this. And I'll go back to the meeting we're in this evening. We can still make a difference. What we do in our own processes through congregations in Scotland is we have 3 focuses on how we live from an environmental perspective, committed to change in the environment. One's around spiritual living, discussing issues, our congregational life, our life as a people of faith with discussion, prayer, study. One aspect as well is around global living, where we look at local and national concerns, and where, for example, the work that World Jewish Relief do, building connections you might already have with communities around the world who actually bear the brunt. The people who can least afford to manage the impact of climate change are the ones who have to pay the biggest price normally in their communities. And you'll have these connections already through those charity connections you have through the likes of World Jewish Relief. But in terms of practical living, which is what I'm going to focus on for the last few minutes, this year's been really important for us in identifying the need to show people that you can make a difference in your own lives. It's not just about action in the congregation buildings, about saving energy and about making a difference in terms of the way that those buildings operate. Although they're very important as a focus for our faith communities, it's also about individuals taking action. Having what we call climate conversations, where we talk about the changes we all need to make, and being able to use forum like Zoom to talk to people about whether it's changes in energy, changes in food, in terms of reducing your carbon footprint or the journey it takes for food to travel around the world, looking at issues in relation to travel and looking at just reduction of waste and consumption. One of the really important things we can do is share that knowledge with each other in training. And that's one of the things that we do as a charity. And we're really keen to do that with any community groups, and particularly those from other faith groups who are keen to do the same work. We've had really successful training in this year on the idea of love food, hate waste, and being able to reduce the food waste in our communities, in our own homes, and also love your clothing, which is about recycling clothing and caring for our clothes in such a way. Fast fashion's become such a popular trend where people will buy the cheapest clothes without any thought about how long they'll last or the impact on the environment and people in other parts of the world in production of these clothing, sometimes in really difficult circumstances. So we've done really successful training events that are open to all, that anybody can be invited to and can share amongst others to just learn about some of the ways we can change our behaviour to reduce our damaging carbon emissions in terms of our impact on the environment. There's a big push towards Scotland becoming a net zero nation by 2045, and we all need to make changes over this decade in terms of the way we live our lives to reduce the harm that we do individually in our families and in our communities on the environment. But we also want to talk about the difficulties people can have in this, because electric cars, if you live in a tenement in Dundee, is not a solution if you don't have anywhere to charge your car in the street. It's also important to look at the cost of double glazing and triple glazing and insulation as our transport options for people in different parts of the country to be able to get out of their car, or are those transport connections not there locally? So we want to have genuine climate conversations about the changes we make and the sort of help we can ask for from the Scottish Government and UK Government to make those changes a reality. And it's also about enjoying, the final point I'll make, enjoying the environment and caring for that creation. There's a really good example in one of the congregations we're involved in, Newton Mearns Baptist Church, which is obviously very close to very much the heart of the Jewish community in Scotland in terms of its location. And they've grown an orchard this year in twinning with churches in Hungary and building a really good sense of community around learning and growing and respecting creation. And one of the balances that we have to do towards becoming a net zero nation is not just reducing the harm, it's about doing positive things, one of which will be, frankly, about nature-based solutions that could involve growing more trees. But in that situation, that's a response to growing something in a community, learning skills and bringing people together in a way that they can enjoy the environment and not just worry about the climate crisis that we face. So we're really keen to support as much as we can in this process. Individually, coming together through Zoom has been a really good thing for us in terms of training and people talking about the issues that they're concerned about, whether it's energy in your congregation buildings or learning how to cut food waste and sharing that in your own family at home and in your wider community. So thank you very much for your time. Delighted to be here, and I look forward to working closely with you in the coming year of COP26. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'd now like to pass on to Rabbi Wittenberg and Rabbi Mason for their thoughts on how we can make a difference during the pandemic.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Kirsty. I'm going to, obviously we have two representatives here of SCoJeC. Firstly, actually, Rabbi Wittenberg is the founder, I should say, of SCoJeC, and I'm one of four rabbis, well, myself, Rabbi Wittenberg, and two other rabbis who run the sort of rabbinic leadership team of SCoJeC. So thanks, Stephen, for those really helpful comments. It's really good to be here. It's really good to be part of an interfaith structure too, and I'm really thrilled to be also connected to the work of SCoJeC again, having grown up with it and experienced it. Good to see Ephraim here as well, and if I mention Leslie, I think Leslie probably taught me at Cheder in Edinburgh when I was a wee lad. So look, we read in the Torah, of course, early in the Torah, that Adam was placed in the Garden of Eden, the Ovda Ulashomra, to work the land and to look after and to conserve the land. And it's clear that we are living in an epoch where our working of the land is overtaking our ability to conserve it and keep it. And if anyone is able to or has looked at the recent New Scientist edition just this week, there's a great state of the year in graphs, pictorial, in essays there, which shows you where we're going, and it's not pretty. It's not pretty at all. And so there's a lot of work for us to do as faith communities. There is a sense of urgency, but there's also a sense in which I assume across faiths, many people on the ground are starting to act, aren't they? They're starting to say, oh, I think I can do this. I think I can stop using disposables in my community. I think I can have ideas to waste. I can start considering maybe my meat consumption can reduce a little bit. Unfortunately, in my religion, meat is often enjoyed by many. And actually, it's possibly a thing to reflect on where we go with that. So that's where we are. And an SCoJeC, having obviously looked at and experiencing and learned from the great work of SCoJeC, and seeing what goes on across, felt that it was relevant to build a project, a movement, an organization which would be relevant across Jewish communities, i.e. across all denominations, given that this is something of absolute importance for us all to work on together. And that's SCoJeC. And I think the important point to make here is this, is that all of us in our faiths, we all have a large capacity within our faiths in terms of building stock, use of energy. In other words, how many places of worship are there across religions? They are buildings, right? Those buildings might not, of course, generate energy, but they use energy. They bring in energy from other sources. Lots of the things that they do in the community. What type of a boiler exists in that community? What type of insulation? What type of window structure exists in that building? And so we realized that there is a lot of work that could be done to, in a sense, measurably increase, well, we'd say decrease, of course, the carbon footprint across our communities. And that's an amazing thing. Now, of course, the way we measure our carbon footprint has different, as we learned, Rabbi Wittenberg and I learned recently from a member of Rabbi Wittenberg's synagogue, actually, has number of scopes and a number of circles. It's fine to measure the energy you bring in. But for instance, us rabbis and ministers often like to fly to other countries to conferences. Well, that's a carbon emission. People drive to places of worship. In my synagogue on a Saturday, hopefully they don't drive to the place of worship. I say with tongue in cheek, because when I was a kid, I think I probably drove to the place of worship in Edinburgh. Leslie, you're not meant to nod your head there. And so there's emissions, right? There are emissions in lots of things that are done throughout the scope of the life of the community. And so I think we realized at SCoJeC that we had a great opportunity here across tens, if not hundreds of synagogues, to literally be able to say we can reduce massively the carbon footprint across. We can, if you like, and we've talked about this amongst ourselves a lot, bring our synagogues down to net zero. Now, net zero, there's a lot of discussion as to what net zero is. If you look at Bill Gates' book, right, on how to avoid a climate disaster, he'll tell you even about his life that to get to net zero is hard. Do we offset? Do we pay for carbon? There's all sorts of discussions, but we can drastically reduce together our carbon footprint. And surely that's something as people of faith that we can do. So I feel that at the moment in this pandemic, we, Rabbi Wittenberg, myself, and others, have taken an opportunity, and I should add that the SCoJeC is supported by the Board of Deputies of British Jews. So it is a mainstream, in a sense, very strong cross-communal Jewish organization. We feel that now, given that we've had this sort of mini rest in the COVID time, however painful, of course, COVID has been, to be able to say when we slowly come out of COVID, when we move back slowly to whatever normality will bring and will be, that we prioritize, we still are able to prioritize, number one, how we deal with sustainability in our own community, and number two, how we talk about it within our community. And I personally thought what Stephen said in, regarding, you know, the issues, I suppose, of finance and class are really important, because this is going to involve both internal work, but also an external pushing and campaigning space for us. And Rabbi Wittenberg will talk about that, I'm sure, in the next slot, for us all regarding, of course, the government, because it's all very well to say we should all have heat pumps, but they cost. They cannot just be changed like that. And it will be the same with many churches and many synagogues. Some can afford, many will not be able to. Very, very quickly, what I will do is share with you, just very quickly, hopefully I will be able to get this, give me a second, our website, just so you can get a really quick flavor of the website of SCoJeC. And you should be able to see there, that's not the front page, but that shows you the 5 sections of what we call our environmental audit. So synagogue will register to take our audit, which we've worked on for quite a while. In fact, it's been a process over 2 or 3 years, really. And we're very pleased with what we've got now. And communities will register and will then begin looking at the questions you can see here in these 5 areas. Management of the community. Has the community got proper policies in place? Is the management behind? Is the council or the board behind it? Prayer and teaching, is it part of the educational teaching section of the community, which is vital? Are rabbis and ministers talking about this for us? Are rabbis? What about the lifestyle of the community? Clearly, section 4 for synagogues who have buildings, land is massive. What are you doing? Biodiversity, the building, and of course, consumables, what comes in. And then, as I think, Stephen, you related to, larger community and global engagement. So I echo in a lot of what you said, which is so really helpful to see. And a community will do this, and then, like the SCoJeC Award, will be awarded, and we will be there to support them on a journey which will improve their points in their audit, and with that, of course, their carbon footprint as well. So maybe I'll leave it there, and I hope that was helpful and put some context on EcoSynagogue. Back to you, Kirsty.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Mason. I'd now like to go on to, keeping with both of you and Stephen, what you think we can do and what to expect and how to prepare for COP26, how we can make a positive difference and what we can expect from that period of time.
So is that over to me? Sorry, Kirsty.
Yes, on you go.
Thank you. So first of all, I just like to appreciate being here. And I grew up in Glasgow until I was, so anything to do with Scotland, I'm passionate about, and also have a really strong sense of the wonder and beauty of the country, because that's where we go walking in the wilderness in the northwest of Scotland every year if we can. I also appreciate the interfaith and interdenominational aspects of working together on climate. It's why it was so important to me to be alongside Rabbi David Mason at this gathering. And thank you for every single word you said. So preparing for COP26 is a huge challenge. And I think we need to work. The first thing I want to say is I believe we need to work on every level. This has already been said, but I'll put it in my own words. We need to work individually. What am I doing in my own home in terms of the words of Satya right at the beginning, that we kind of treat the world as our commodity, needs to change fundamentally in any way that we can. And love your food, don't love waste, love your clothes, don't waste them. I really like that slogan. There's a lot of people have said to me, but what's the point of doing things as individuals when really it's what China, India, and America do that counts? I believe we have no moral integrity unless we start at home. And also starting at home presents us with what the real challenges are and educates us for what we have to say to others. So that's the first sort of level. The second, we are here as faith communities, is to work in our communities. And as Rabbi Mason said, huge numbers of the Earth's population belong to a faith community. It's estimated at about 80%. This country is a particularly secular country, but that's exceptional. And a very significant amount of the educational establishments of the world are also parts of faith communities. So faiths have a very strong and significant role. And interestingly, this has been, the Vatican is co-hosting with the UK in Glasgow, and the Vatican has been deeply interested in what faiths contribute. The leadership of the Pope with Laudato Si, his appeal to share more carefully our plan at home, has now led to a further conference because it's felt that it made a great impact, but it didn't create enough action. So the challenge is there across all our faiths, SCoJeC, Eco-Mosque, Eco-Synagogue, Eco-Church, and their equivalents elsewhere in the world, including Scotland, are how can we activate to make a difference? So that's the next level. A further level, I believe, is that we have to lobby. I'm not naturally a political animal, but one of the obstacles to change has been described simply as a lack of political will. And therefore, We have to use the moral voices of our faiths. And here we need our own integrity in meaning and living what we say to write to our political leaders at every level, so that there is no doubt that this is important to the whole population. I have in my community a senior civil servant at DEFRA, and I asked her, what makes a difference to politicians? What do people notice? And she said, when so-called, inverted commas, reasonable people in large numbers care about an issue, because then it becomes a voting issue and an electoral issue. And one of the challenges we have in this country is that politicians often think in short-term cycles because one wants to get re-elected naturally. So we have to make our voices known in numbers and at every level of political representation, at local councils, in the Scottish government, the Westminster government, and internationally as well. In addition to that, I think we have to be talking together with educationalists, lawmakers, and leaders of business. And one of the things tomorrow, a number of us faith leaders are meeting with Alok Sharma. And one of the things that I want to stress is to be sure that faith leaders won't be siloed into some sort of faith corner, which is not really considered influential at COP, but rather that we should be put together with the political, economic, legal, educational leaders, and those media personalities who've got access to millions of people through their personal charisma and stature, to make sure that we really, really have a voice. All of those things need loads of work. There are further challenges. One of them, I'm just going to highlight one of them, which really preoccupies me a lot, and sort of put it out there for questions. And with that for later, and with that I'll close. Which is, how do we message about climate? I've encountered in my own community people who say we just don't want to hear. Every second day, there's something in the papers telling us that we're heading for disaster. It doesn't inspire one to act, to feel completely hopeless. We also, it's also hard to change a lifestyle with which one's familiar. So there's something very, very important about pitching our messaging with the positives as much as we can. I don't think we can avoid don't do's. I think they are part of what has to change, but they need to be counterbalanced and outweighed by positive messaging. And I'm still trying to work out how we do this. There are some obvious ones. Planting trees. Trees for Life is the most wonderful North of Scotland organization, but there are many across the world. There's the whole 8,000 kilometer, 20 kilometer wide belt across Africa below the Sahara. But I think we also need to talk about enhanced lifestyle. We need to make sure that alongside climate change, we emphasize climate justice and what this will achieve for some of the world's poorest people, so that people feel empowered, inspired, and eager to participate, rather than simply frightened into a kind of immobility, because I think our civilization may feel a little bit like we're caught like rabbits in the headlights, and we need to be using all our energies here. I'll hold there. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, do you have anything to add to that on how we can prepare for COP26?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a particular interest in Scotland because we're the hosts, and particularly in the Scottish Jewish community, there's a great tradition of hospitality. So there's an important thing for us in Scotland, particularly those of us who are in and around Glasgow, but all of Scotland's up for this one really, to have a responsibility to offer hospitality and a welcome to the world. Now, originally there were going to be 10,000 people coming to Glasgow for COP. We still don't know if it'll be a bit of a mixture of online and people coming, but one thing's certain, we can offer a welcome online or in person. And there's a really fantastic opportunity for us potentially to open up our places of worship, our congregational spaces, to perhaps welcome people from around the world. Because of the COVID restrictions, there's a lot of contingency planning around this through civil society groups. But one other option is for people like Airbnb or Couchsurfing to be able to offer their home on an ethical alternative, if you like, to some of those particular services whether it's room space or even your home, because there are people who are obviously making a lot of money out of offering pretty basic hotel space within an hour of Glasgow for folk who are travelling to the COP. And it's diplomats, but also people whose voice we need to hear from the global south, and campaigners, pilgrims who are making a journey, as we heard from Satya earlier. One other thing we can look at as well is around transformation in our own communities, which is something that both Rabbi Wittenberg and Rabbi Mason have spoken about, and we'll be delighted to welcome them back to Scotland for COP26 as well. But for us, I think it's about that transformation in our own communities. We can take practical action and be motivated by COP, because Scotland's got fantastic potential in renewable energy. It's got fantastic natural resources that could be part of the answer. But we also want to show the world that we can help lead in terms of that response. And that's where the call to government is really important as well. But wouldn't it be fantastic if we could, in our own faith communities, make connections we already have to listen to the stories about the impact of climate change? But COP itself is a decision maker where countries commit to reduce that harmful increase in the planet bubbling over with global warming. And we want to see that action being led by, well, the UK government as the host, but also from our own perspective in the communities of Scotland, welcoming those people from all around the world. 5 years ago, there was a Paris Agreement, which was really groundbreaking. It'd been more exciting for us to say there was a Glasgow Agreement this year, and we were part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I think that's a really fitting note to then move on to some questions that we've got. And I'd like to start with Satya on that incredible note of working within our own faith communities and those around us. We'd love to hear more about what you have planned to engage with faith communities around the time of COP26, and what actions would you like to see communities take themselves?
Thank you, Kirsty. Yes, so we are going to have in May, on the 24th of May, a COP26 themed faith community engagement event. So we will be speaking to the faith communities about what COP26 means for Glasgow, for the world, for the earth, and we'll be talking about the faith dimension that's being presented as an opportunity. So we would really love to see as many people come to the event from the faith communities. It's absolutely crucial, and we'll be sharing concretely. We'll have speakers who will be talking about how you can practically get involved in the COP. And Rabbi Wittenberg and Rabbi Mason and also Stephen have already named some of the very concrete actions you can take at a personal level, at a community level. So yeah, this is definitely one opportunity for us to really, involve the faith communities into COP, into the preparation. And I'm just going to see, there's so many things that you can do as well as part of the preparation. One is to come along and find out what you can do. Keep yourself informed. Just really seek out information and get the whole family involved, as well as willing friends and neighbors. So that's one way that we will be reaching out to faith communities.
Thank you, Satya. I'd like to move back onto Rabbi Wittenberg and Rabbi Mason. As leaders within the Jewish community, how do you personally feel you have guided actions towards climate change, and do you feel you've had a greater effect because of your positions in the community?
Sure. And David, you want to go? You go first, David.
I think we both have networks. We've come from different denominations. We all have positions within those denominations. That's the 4 rabbis that run SCoJeC, and I think we've all worked very hard to engage others in our networks to become part of it. So I think we've looked almost at that sideways impact, the great impact that we can have on others, on colleagues, on people within organizations. So I know within mine in the United Synagogue, which is what I'm part of, that's been really, really positive. And I think above that, what's been really helpful, certainly for myself, I know for all of us, including Rabbi Wittenberg, is the chief rabbi. Rabbi Mervis has taken a really, really strong, passionate and positive view in supporting the work of Eco Synagogue. He recently came out on Earth Day with a statement. You know, he's right there at the front. So knowing that you've got a chief rabbi, from my perspective, certainly, that is so passionate, just facilitates, allows, permits the inspiration to continue and to trickle down. So I think we have a lot of positive work we can do. We're growing the number of communities. We're aiming towards the end of the year for at least 50 communities to be registered and working on the environmental audit. And I hope we can measure what that effect is. So yes, I think we're very aware, you know, we're humbled by it as well, I suppose. We're aware of the responsibility that we have, as Rabbi Wittenberg quite rightly said. We're also aware of the work we have to do to convince people that this is, you know, a priority for Jewish communities to be part of. I don't know if Jonathan, if you want to.
I'd agree with all of that, and kind of I appreciate your collegiality and the you know, working to. It's not often that all sectors of a religious community come together with the same shared passion to work together, and it shows how this issue really unites us, and reunites us with. You know, there are a number of interfaith forums in which we're each part, and the sense of common purpose is so great. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I just see Adi, your child there. That's so lovely to see. And you know, we owe the future to our children. We owe the future. There's nothing more important. I would say that the Jewish community has been a little bit late to the party here. We've been very strong on caring about refugees, which is a closely related issue. We've been a bit late to the environmental issue, but now we're really coming on board. And a lot of our energy is towards to create the infrastructure and the means to draw as many communities in as possible. And once we have them together, we'll then be able to push the particular actions we can do. I'll add one thing which has been very important, close to my heart, as a kind of a walking in forests lover, which is we also launched a year ago on the Jewish New Year for trees, a year and a bit ago, jtree.global, which is a tree planting trees. We're planting through the Woodland Trust, the International Tree Foundation, who works with women's groups in Uganda, and the American equivalent organization is replanting after the forest fires across the United States. And we're about 110,000 trees so far, which is nothing compared to the need. But I feel we're at the beginning of the journey with a very long way to go and a great deal of urgency.
Thank you so much for that. Leading on from that, Stephen, as someone who's reached across faith groups about these green initiatives that we've been talking about this evening, have you seen any kind of common shift towards climate action in the last, couple of years or so?
Yes, thanks, Kirsty. I mean, I think we really have. And just to slightly answer a point Rabbi Wittenberg made, I would say that the Jewish community is not late to the party, but is timely and relevant in the way that it's addressing the issue. Because it's easy to lecture people, it's easy to talk about, we have to do this, we must do that. You have to bring people with you in your community. And as communities of faith, we need to support people through the current crises in terms of the pandemic. So for us, I think we've found that faith communities have been really strong at responding to those people who are isolated in their community, who are vulnerable, who are struggling through the past year. But also, some of those people are those who will be worst affected by the climate change impact, whether it's in terms of health with rising temperatures or the cost of change to try to cope with some of the changes that governments may ask us to make that are needed to make as well. So what I've found really is that people are coming together really closely on an interfaith basis, particularly Interfaith Scotland leading on that work up here, Interfaith Glasgow, Edinburgh Interfaith Association. I know Rabbi Mason spoke with my colleague David Coleman, who's our eco chaplain. He was called Rabbi David that night, and he's loved it ever since. I think he wants to change that to the phrase we use for him now. But the other thing that's really important is working directly with faith, because we've got to be authentic about the people of faith that we are, and meeting that commonality of people caring for our common home, the planet Earth. And I really have found people are genuinely motivated by COP being in Scotland as something that gets us out of our seats saying, what do we do? What difference can we make? And how can we support each other and those people who are struggling around the world for a just green recovery from coronavirus that addresses the climate crisis? And it's quite inspiring for me to see colleagues from different faith traditions working together. And I think the interfaith focus is really important for that welcome to Glasgow and Scotland for COP as well, where we hope the UK government will give us a space in the secure zone for the pass holders visiting the country for the conference to have a space that they can call a sort of sanctuary or chaplaincy space as well. So I think there's been real motivation shown, particularly this year in a UK and a Scottish context, but also because of our faith connections around the world, people sharing and caring for the planet together.
Can I add something? Is that okay? I feel there's been the most, perhaps I shouldn't say this, the most enormous boost by the fact that it's President Biden who is setting an international agenda here. He's clearly passionate, well-informed, and ready to make significant commitments. And he's also put it in positive terms. And that's, I found that inspired, I felt really lifted by that message from one of the major polluting nations to have a different kind of intention. And I just hope the leadership in our country will be as strong and as committed and as clear. A number of us faith leaders, signatories to the Lambeth Declaration, are meeting with Alok Sharma tomorrow. And one of the things we'll be saying collectively is we want very strong leadership with integrity of commitment, that the government will say the right things and mean them and set, urgent targets for reductions of emissions and for the support of green recovery and green industry across the country.
Thank you. I'd like to now open up to questions from the floor. We've got a couple of minutes to take some. We've lost Rabbi Mason, but if anyone wants to ask questions of our remaining panelists, you're more than welcome to. And I would like to start off with Philip Mendelsohn. So Philip, on you go.
Thanks, Kirsty. Good evening, everyone. Jewish communities are renowned for their territorialism. Everybody needs their own shtibel. For those that aren't aware, shtibel is a small synagogue, so everybody wants to have their own little place that their organisation can put their nameplate up at the front door. And I'm just wondering how we actually get away from that and encourage organisations to be, to think of the bigger picture rather than do everything, on their own count.
Should I respond to that? Is that so? Eco Synagogue, really working with the Board of Deputies of British Jews, is deliberately cross-denominational and cross-communal. So that we've got congregations there from the Orthodox to the most liberal, and we support each other and we put up there things that have worked for us, things that have not worked for us. We're at the beginning of that journey, but it is, it is one of those areas which has really brought us together. And that's terribly, terribly important, because as you say, the last thing we need is to be too parochial here. The planet isn't a parochial place. It's all of us together here. You're right.
Thank you so much. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to wave your hand digitally or physically. I can see Leslie, if you want to go now.
Thank you very much for all these very enlightened talks. I think it was Rabbi Wittenberg who talked about the need to show some positive messages, and I think that's right, because otherwise it's all gloom and doom. And I wondered if you could suggest either a short video or some ideas of what we can actually tell people that is positive, apart from planting trees, which are going to take a long time to replace.
I think there are a number. Planting trees, first of all, I think is is a great one. I think it is so inspiring, and people feel very uplifted by it. And although it takes a long time, we, in the Gairloch area where our family, we've just watched over the last years the forests regrow from nothing to really significant. But I think there are others, and very interesting has been during lockdown, the degree to which people have felt that nature, even if it's what they can see from their window, if we're lucky enough to look at least at a tree, or walks, what that has brought in terms of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So I think that's also a positive message to emphasize. Also, our interdependence with nature. People, one of the first things commented about Wuhan after its peak had passed was there was birdsong again for the first time in years. You could see the stars. So I would very strongly emphasize the clean energy, clean air, our connection with nature, because across the age ranges and across so many parts of society and faiths, people appreciate these things. Those are some other of the positives. Also, I think we're probably secretly ashamed of the amount of waste. I certainly am. So small ways in which we can reduce waste and take our own carrier bags and not come home with plastic. All of these, we should say, that's one helpful thing that I've been able to do. So I would up those rather than focus on the guilt tripping, too much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe, Addy, you had your hand up as well, so I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm sorry for my accent. I'm from Israel. I would like to say thank you for this event. It's very important that we will have a say how religion can affect our climate and to the better. I'm also a representative from an environmental organization, and we are coming for another year to the COP. We were in the previous three, and we would like to come also to the COP in Glasgow and in greater numbers. And my request for you is to try to how can we work together and how can we collaborate till the COP, and of course during the COP and after that, so we'll be having the most effective action to speak to, if it's for our communities and if it's to our governments, to do the action we should see from them, and hopefully we'll be able to work together from this point. So, and if anyone have any ideas how we can collaborate together, I would very much appreciate if it can be coming up here today. Thank you.
Maybe I can say something about that, Adi. I mean, there is a platform called the the Interfaith Liaison Committee, which is connected to the UNFCCC, and it meets every 2 months. And Interfaith Glasgow and Interfaith Scotland are part of this committee, and I can send you my email address, and I'm sure you'd be a welcome organization, and you would be able to meet and connect with many other interfaith organizations involved in it. We are also planning as part of the COP26 manifestation, lovely heart, that's beautiful. I love the language, the online language, it's great. Thank you. It's beautiful. Thank you. So we'll be holding, we've just recently had a meeting with Glasgow City Council about the Tylenola Dialogue. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Tylenola Dialogue, but no. Okay, Jonathan Wittenberg says no. Okay, so just a quick sort of definition of it. So Tylenola is a word in the Fiji language in the Pacific region, and it means to hold a conversation in an inclusive and receptive space. And it's a traditional method in the Pacific region of solving differences. And the term Tylenola Dialogue were set up to break the climate emergency deadlock by drawing participants together through their sharing of stories of climate emergency. And it's basically a dialogue. It's a way to also monitor the progress on the Paris Agreement goal of limiting of the carbon footprint reduction. And also it's a space to inform the next round of national climate pledges. So does that help? Rabbi Wittenberg?
That very much helps. If you could put that dialogue in the chat, I'd love to see it. Thank you very much indeed.
Hold on.
I also was just struck me that different groups and different countries have different kind of things to contribute. As you know, Israel's got a reputation as a high tech nation, and I think, you know, on that tech level, there are particular contributions that have already been made and will continue to be made. And I think thinking globally about the different kinds of voices and the different kinds of contributions that particular groups can make will also be a form of creative collaboration, which will be really, really important.
Great. And just one more thing to add about the Tylenola Dialogue is we're aiming to hold one in Glasgow. So Adi, let's stay in touch, and you know that's a possibility for your organization, for yourself to potentially become involved as well. Great.
Thank you, Satya. And I think that's a great place to draw this evening to a close. I'd love to thank all four of our panelists, Satya, Rabbi Wittenberg, Stephen, and Rabbi Mason, who had to leave earlier, for joining us and giving us some real food for thought for this evening. Thank you, all of you, for attending and spending your Sunday evening with us. We'll be happy to email out some recommendations and links and bits and pieces so that we can all stay in touch and really make a real difference when it comes to COP26 and just in our everyday lives. So thank you so much for spending your evening with us, and have a lovely week.